Hey there, ladies. And yes, I did say ladies. I have a question for you. Do you feel overwhelmed with uncertainty or a lack of clarity as you head into your day? Or maybe you struggle with the anxiety of wanting more, but not knowing how to make the necessary changes in the midst of being a mom, raising baby, grocery shopping, all the things, but you're ready. You're ready to wake up feeling focused and aligned with the dreams that God has given you so you can wholeheartedly pursue what matters most in your faith, family, and career. If that's you, then I want to gift you with a free mini course where I literally give you my morning routine for success. That's right. Being a mom of 5 under the age of 9, I know firsthand how important our mornings are. And with my proven faith-based daily routine, you too can align your actions and your dreams in just 15 minutes a day. This morning routine is not just about getting up early. It's about cultivating the right mindset, heart set, and dream set that will encourage you and equip you in arising and aligning every morning. Click on the link below and you can receive this free gift today. Don't spend the rest of your life just dreaming about the life you want. Arise to the challenge and create the life you want one morning at a time.
Welcome to the Dream On podcast. I am Julia Gentry.
And I am Travis Gentry.
Just making sure you're paying attention. Welcome. So every podcast, we start off with a question for each other. If you don't know, it's just to kind of for you to get to know us a little bit. So it's my turn. My question is, so we live in Bentonville, Arkansas currently. We've been here for 8 months. And we are thinking of moving somewhere else. Where are we moving?
I cannot believe you're asking this question for everybody to hear.
Or are we moving?
Are we playing the vulnerability game where we're allowing people in on our process?
No.
No, then why are you asking me that question?
I don't really care what anybody else thinks. It's just right now in this moment, where would we be moving, or are we staying here? This is how we do life. Like we don't just move across the street or across the town. Like we think about where else in the country, or maybe we'll open it up to the world now that the world's back open here for the last year. Maybe we'll move to a different country.
Here's what I think we should do. I think we should ask the participants, the audience, where do you think we should move next? The person with the best idea wins.
But for now, we'll stick with Julia.
So reframe the question, because I don't know if you're asking me, are we moving? Where would I move? If I could move anywhere. So reframe
all of whatever comes to mind right now. Go.
Yes, I would move.
Where?
Back to Bend, Oregon.
We've been there 3 or 4 times.
All roads lead to Bend.
That's one of them that we're.
Or I would dabble in, and I don't know why, but I would dabble in the idea of Colorado Springs. And that is not because I have a whole lot of information, which is generally how I make every good decision. Travis, I'll never get Travis like, why are you? I don't know. I just felt that. Well, do you have any facts? No facts. There's no stats. There's no facts. I just have this feeling.
It's awesome. Denver, and we've lived there a few different times.
We've never lived in Colorado Springs.
I know Colorado. I'm just okay. Denver, Colorado, but we literally have lived all throughout the metro area, from all the way south to Castle Rock, which is almost like 30 minutes
but not
to
quite,
Colorado Springs,
but not quite.
And then all the way up in Brighton. So we haven't lived on the west, in the mountains. So it's just funny though, because like we moved from Bend back to Denver, down to Florida, back to I think Denver, and then up to Boise, and then to Bend, and then so we're that's kind of our home base, our hub that we got to touch every few years. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that makes sense. We'll move to Colorado Springs.
Here's why I hate this, because I give it a couple weeks and I'm going to get more phone calls and text messages and emails from people listening to this. Even my mom is like, I didn't know you were moving. I'm like, I'm not moving. I heard on your podcast. I'm like, I'm not. Oh my gosh, great. My phone's going to blow up.
Most of my family is like, oh, awesome. That's great. You're moving again.
You moved? Where are you? I don't know.
We just won't tell anybody.
You don't know, but all of us need a good goal, which is exactly what we're talking about today. We are not talking about where we're living. We want to know, where are you going to be living, team? So on this podcast, we are going to be talking about goal setting demystified and why you're not crushing your goals. Why are you not crushing your goals? It's a big topic to talk about.
That is.
And if you listen to last week's episode, we hit on this staggering statistic of that fact that 43% of Americans even decide to set a New Year's resolution, many of which we just put it this way, 23% of that small percentage actually make it 1 week, count it 7 days before they quit. Then of that next percentage, 43 quit by the end of January. And by the time that someone actually achieves their goal, what was once a 41% moves all the way down to a 9% of people are actually achieving their goals. And so we're going to unpack that today and hopefully provide you with some insight as to why that's happening, give you some vulnerable shares around the times that I'll just own it myself, why I've not hit the goals that I wanted to hit or didn't set the goals. And really just give you
if you don't set a goal, it's hard to hit a goal.
Hard to miss it. Hard to
Well, hit it, miss it. It just
don't have one, right? So we just want to talk about this because it's just that time of the year.
Hit my goal.
It's the time of the year, and more people.
That's awesome.
So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about that. So my question to you is almost like, we pull out back to like the power of words, and how like every word is just a word until you give it meaning. And so when you hear that word New Year's resolutions, what runs through your head?
I think it's, so I not going down the tangent, but just so you know a little bit about how I think a lot of the holidays are commercialized, and they're so commercialized that people buy into them and just do what everybody else does. And so I think the same thing with New Year's resolutions. I think it's commercialized and it's played out. People talk about it, and it's something to give someone hope in the future on a specific day. But in reality, like, it shouldn't be January 1st that I'm going to start to do something. It should be if it's in me and I want to accomplish it, I start today.
It's solid.
That's what I think.
I think we should make a t-shirt that says that. Here's what I think what you're saying is so powerful is that the idea that January 1st is the day that I can make a change is as easy as January 1st will come and go, and I don't actually have to be accountable to that change, right? Because it like is more about the day than the mindset. It's more about the day than the passion towards the end point, right? It's like you're more fixed on the starting point than you are the finished point, which is why I think that so few people actually get to their goal is because it's oftentimes about the emotion and the feeling of the goal and not the desire to actually achieve it. Here's what I mean.
They like the idea.
I like the idea. You said, this is one of my favorite things you've said in a long time. And you say a lot of things that I really like, but we're at the dinner table the other day and you said, I like the experience of peace, but I don't want to learn the lesson of peace. And we were kind of joking around because you were being tested on, that's been a big grounding word for you this year, is just like walking in peace and having patience and getting in line and staying in line. And so when you said it like with kind of a smirk on your face, but I think that's so true. Like, I like the idea of losing weight, but I don't want the process of losing weight.
Yeah.
Like, I like the idea.
Go through, go
like,
to the gym and
I
have
like
to not eat certain foods.
I like the idea of writing this book, but no, I don't actually want to do like the hard things of writing this book. And it's funny because I've been talking to our community. There's a lot of people lately that have been in our community saying, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. I want to write a book. And so in our academy last week, one of the gals was like, no, I want to write a book, but I've been really struggling because, I just don't feel inspired, And I was like, I know what? And she goes, well, like, you write when you're inspired. And I said, says no successful author ever. And she goes, yeah, I mean, think about David and about all the people in the faith, they wrote when they were inspired. And I said, no, they didn't. They were inspired by the Holy Spirit, but they weren't inspired when they were writing. They were inspired by the Holy Spirit that was leading them to write the things that they didn't want to write, part the sea when they didn't want to part the Red Sea, build the ark when I don't want to build an ark. I don't even know if it's going to rain.
Yeah.
And I said, these men of faith were not inspired when they were doing it. They were inspired by the Holy Spirit to do it. Two totally different things.
Yep.
But I think that's the biggest problem, is that we all like the idea of the inspiration, but we don't want to do the journey of living inspired.
And there's a lot of scriptures based around kind of like the vision, a goal.
Yeah.
And then, like write it down, make it become real, like meditate on it, make sure that it's wisdom and God's going to align your steps. But so one of the verses that I found is Proverbs 16:3, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans, which is like, okay, like God, here's what I want to do. Here's what I feel called to do. And he's going to establish your plans, your steps.
Yeah.
And whether it's connections or, like a divine appointment, it's amazing how I've been thinking or wanting to do something. And then out of the blue, in a random spot, you run into someone that does something or knows someone that does what you are seeking. And it's not by chance.
Yeah.
And so I think it's also like putting it out there. And it comes back to a couple of scriptures we talked about last time. Like it's being still with God, but then it's also putting in the work.
Yeah.
And moving forward. So just like any goal, you write it down and you're like, okay, I want to lose 30 pounds. And then what does it take and who do I have to become to lose that 30 pounds? And where do I need to shift my focus to, of not what I can't have, but what I can have, because I'm going to feel better. I'm going to have more energy. And so it's just the perspective of that too. And that's where I believe God comes in too, is like, he's going to help you fulfill those desires that you did have and shift them into the things that you do get out of the process and who you become. And we've talked about that before, but it's really not about the destination. It's about who you become physically, mentally, spiritually, through the process of like dreaming and goal setting.
Yeah. Well, and I think when I consider goals, and, even in our academy, we call it a growth plan, just because the idea of growth, like it's a goal is designed to grow you. And so I think even for the people who are listening, they're like, oh, I don't set goals either because I don't believe in them, or I've been disappointed, or why would I don't like, that's playing so small for the kingdom of God. It's almost debilitating us as the church, right? Like here we are supposed to be the ones to shine the light in the darkest of places. And if we're not setting goals that develop character within us to become who God's called us to be, that we're actually diminishing why Jesus came and died for us, right? Like he came so that we would have life and life more abundantly. But the only way that you and I actually can create an abundant life is that we do things that get us out of our comfort zone, right? Get us walking on water. So we get out of our own way, and that we actually position ourselves and align ourselves with those impossible things happening so that there can be a testimony in our life. But I think the problem with that, and one of the scriptures that I love, that I think happens when let's say we put ourselves out there and we set that goal. Well, then all of a sudden there's going to be tension, or there's going to be pressure, or it's going to be hard. Like, oh, I want peace, but do I want to learn the lesson? Or I want to write a book, but do I want to do the hard thing? But John 16:33 says this. Jesus is telling his disciples, he says, I've told you these things so that in me you might have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And I think why Jesus is saying this is because he's like, hey, I'm going to give you everything. We've overcome. You live from victory now. When you believe, you live from victory, you live from done, you live from complete. But you're going to have trouble. There's going to be tension. There's going to be obstacles. There's going to be problems. And I think that sometimes when we're in pursuit of our dream, our goal, when it doesn't happen in our will, our way, our time, I think we blame ourselves, or we go, well, there we go again. I don't have what it takes. Or we downgrade God to fit the problem. Right? Like we all of a sudden go, well, God, you're not as big as the obstacle. And we like take how big he is and we put him underneath the problem. And now the problem is bigger than God in our perspective. And so we just give up, as opposed to realizing that this obstacle doesn't have to break me. It doesn't have to stop me. It's just actually there to continue to build my resolve towards the finish line.
It's so easy to look at an external of like, well, God's not, big enough. Well, your desire is not big enough.
Oh, it's so true.
And so if you want something bad enough, you have to be resourceful to get what it is.
Yeah.
And I also think that as we're talking about this too, like to me, goal setting, yes, there's personal goals, but I think like a God-given goal is bigger than you.
Yeah.
And that can be scary, because it takes for you to step out and to be vulnerable and say, like, I don't know these things. And whether it's starting a business or changing careers or whatever it is, like it takes a lot to live out a God-sized dream, rather than like, I want to lose 5 pounds.
Oh man, I know. I think I was telling you this the other day, but I feel like for the first time in my life, I didn't realize how many of the goals and dreams I had were all still in my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time in this last probably couple of months, even as a team, when we've been building some of our dreams, we all look at each other going, I don't know what I'm doing. Right? Like as a team, each one of us are so far out of the boat of what we normally know that we're like, we have to just trust God and just trust the process and keep learning and leaning. Because all of us like, this is just bigger than us and it's outside of our comfort zone and even our skill zone. But we want the dream so bad that it's been the coolest, hardest, most vulnerable experience to be in building something with people I love and also being able to go, I have no idea what I'm doing either, but I know the call that's on our lives. I know what we're building. Keep going. But it's made me look back and go, dang, I never set a dream that was outside of my control zone. All of them could still fit in the box of like, okay, I'm going to lose this amount of weight, or I'm going to hit that revenue goal. Like it was still all in the box.
It's controllable.
It was so controllable.
And it's not out there. So if you don't succeed, then it's like no big deal. But I think that's the habit loop that a lot of people get in, is that they set these goals that they don't obtain, especially New Year's resolutions, and then they don't set a goal anymore. So they're not disappointed. So then I'm not going to set a goal because then I don't have to be disappointed.
Yeah.
By my own actions of like actually walking that goal and that desire out.
Yeah. But that's interesting though, because I think you're right. I think the number one reason that people don't dream is because of disappointment. That I had a dream to be a mom and I can't get pregnant, or I had a dream to be married and it ended in divorce, right? Or I had a dream to have a business and it failed miserably. And so I think what can happen, to your point, is that pain of disappointment is bigger than the pain, right? Or the idea of desire. But how do you, or in your mind, how do you override that pain and disappointment? Especially if it's a dream that you're like, I really, really wanted it. And let's say it's, when Mel died, right? Cindy's dream is demolished. Or, I a couple friends that cannot get pregnant and that is their dream, is to have a family. And so what do you say to that? Because that is a huge piece. Because that's a different than like, I can't lose weight. I'm just disappointed because I failed 100 times. And you're like, well, get up and do it again. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, you just have to want it bad enough. But what about those times in life that you go, I don't have answers. Like, I
mean, I think with a kid, not being able to have a kid, I think that there's different routes and opportunities for you to still fulfill the dream. It just looks different than what you thought it was going to be. Like you having a baby as opposed to you adopting a baby.
Yeah.
So I think there's different, and we know friends of ours that couldn't have babies and they went alternative routes and they couldn't have babies. And then all of a sudden they had 2.
Yeah.
But it was a process from the time God gives you a dream to the time you manifest that dream. There's a process in between, and there's a testing of faith. Like, do you believe through this process? Not like, I got a dream and then tomorrow I have the dream.
Yeah.
Like that it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Nor is it like fulfilling.
Yeah.
And so I think there's also like whatever that is. And there's obviously in the Bible too, there's stories of like, you're going to have a baby and, I believe I'm going to have a baby. And then it's like, it doesn't happen for a long time, but then it does.
Yeah.
And so I think, there's so many different situations. I think for me, looking at some of the dreams that didn't come to fruition, it was like a blessing in disguise. It happened for me, not to me, because it led me to something else.
Yeah.
Like an example of like what I'm doing now, it was actually something else I was doing that we were like excited about and, kind of all in for a minute, but that led me to something else that didn't work out. And some of the relationships didn't work out, but it led me to what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So it's also like looking at, okay, God's going to also guide our steps, and like, like a river, it's going to change. And
come on.
I know.
Come
Garth
on.
Brooks,
No,
Garth
come
Brooks.
on. Garth Brooks. He's actually our guest star on today's podcast. Garth,
Yeah.
Garth, come on in.
He couldn't make it today?
Oh,
okay.
He's playing with Roxy. Okay. Tell him that she needs to take a nap. Okay,
he's
great.
singing to Roxy. A dream is like a river.
Dream is like a river. Yeah, unanswered prayers.
You gotta learn the song before you jump on that one.
Unanswered prayers.
But
Thank
it's
God for
also
unanswered prayers
the
too.
evolution of it, of like, that's what I've seen in my own life, of like looking at it and saying, okay, like this was what I thought my dream was, and I get started and it changes and evolved. And so it's like, it's also like holding it loosely of like,
Mhm.
okay, God, like within this, like, why didn't this work out? Or what did I need to learn from this situation? And then some things have like gotten even better. And some things it takes a year or two before you look back and you're like, thank God
Mhm.
that didn't work out, or that dream didn't come to fruition, but it led me to move to this state to meet my spouse, or whatever it may be, that you can look back. There's always a plan behind the actions. And sometimes it maybe wasn't a God-given dream.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
Maybe it's you see someone else and you're like, well, I want that because they have that, but it's actually not for you.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because what can happen in that process is we start to look more at circumstances and the dream versus the dream giver.
Mhm.
And I think that that's where we have to be really careful, is that we can't put the role of the dream above the dream giver.
Mhm.
And I think all of us are like, I'm guilty of that, right? Of like, there's days that you really recognize that your eyes are just on God and you're like, I just don't care. And then there's all of a sudden you're like, I think I'm focused too much on the thing, like I'm focused
Mhm.
too much on the dream. Like now that's become my God. And so I think in those moments, whether it's pain or it's success, right? When you achieve the dream and yes, I'm finally there, and it's pride and ego. But I think the problem is that the minute that our eyes are off of God, the dream giver, and they're on the dream, and we now are mistaking it as being our source.
Mhm.
And so I'll never forget the day when Cindy, Mal's mom, when she was killed in that car accident, and Cindy at a conference last year made a comment of the day that she found out that Mal died at 17 years old. Her and Mark said they looked at each other right before going to Mexico and having to do all the things that you never plan as a parent to do. She says, we looked right at each other, and she goes, and you can't imagine the level of excruciating pain that you feel when you lose a child, which I cannot imagine. She says it just shuts your whole immune system down. But she said, Mark and I looked at each other and we said, God is good, period. And she said, we had to anchor into something bigger than even like our dream, right? Everything that we've ever wanted. We actually had to even look higher than that and
Mhm.
anchor into the one truth. And that is God is good, period.
Mhm.
And she said she watched other families who lost kids on that accident. And they not only lost kids, they lost their faith because their eyes were off of God onto the loss. And then immediately it just went into safety, security, stability, and they just lost sight of who God was.
Mhm.
And that just really stuck with me because it reminds us in those times, and I'll say to everyone, like, Travis and I are not here to downplay your place of pain or disappointment in your process. And at some level, it's just a good check to go, man, are my eyes off of the goodness of God because circumstances just aren't good.
Mhm.
Like that's a slippery slope.
Mhm.
Circumstances aren't going to be good, but that doesn't mean that God's not good.
Yeah.
It just means that my circumstances aren't good, and He's not done.
Yep. 100%. And there again, if you're like breathing still,
Mhm.
he's not done. You're not done.
Mhm.
And it's like, I think every goal that I've had, it's almost like looking back, it's like a false summit.
Yeah.
Because I think it's the top, and it's like, when I get there, then I'm going to be this, and this, or feel this way. And then you get there and you're like stoked for, 2.5. And then you're like, okay, like kind of on to the next, or there's more. Like I was thinking so small, and there's actually more out there
Yeah.
than what I was thinking. So and that's why I say it's a false summit, because it's like, it's ever growing. Like
Yeah.
you should be ever growing and advancing. Like the whole ideology of like retiring and all that, like I just don't buy into,
Yeah.
because it's like we should always be growing and progressing physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Yeah.
And so you set these goals and you obtain them, but the goal is not the final destination.
Yeah.
The goal is a waypoint. It's a part of the process to ultimately, like, when you do die, but it's not the thing.
Yeah. Well, so to your point, I think the whole point of demystifying this whole idea of goal setting is this isn't just a January 1st thing. This is the day that you just decide every day that that's what I want most, that this is my day. It's not January 1st. It's not the 15th. It's not the end of the month. It's not once a quarter. It's every day is the day where you're like, today is the day. Right. And you had brought this up. It was a quote from Marcus Aurelius. You said, you had sent this to me when he says, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. And I think it's just one of those that you go, that's where I need to anchor in, is that today is my day. You know, like new, his mercies are new every single morning. And then it says, even in the book of Psalms, and this one just came to me, but it talks about being that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. But it says in verse 3, it says, he opens before me pathways to God's pleasure and leads me along in his footsteps of righteousness. And when you look at what that means, it's circular paths of righteousness that circle their way up higher. So the idea here is that God's actually leading us in this path of learning and understanding and revelation. And sometimes we think that it's linear, but it's circular upwards. Like he's actually wanting to take us on this journey of like higher perspective. You know, and so if we're really committed to that, you know, sometimes it feels like, oh, we're having this conversation again. But if you're learning and growing, you're like, no, we're not. We're having it from a new perspective. You know what? I'm having it from like, I didn't have these eyes before. I didn't know this. And so it's not this like beginning end with God. He's like, I'm taking you higher in my revelation to get closer to me, to look up towards me. And I think that changes how we quote unquote do goal setting, is that we just make it a way of life.
And I mean, sometimes as you're saying that, like I hear something or have a conversation, and then weeks or months later, I have that same, or I hear it in a different way, and then it clicks, and you're like, oh, like now I get it. I wasn't prepared fully. You know, the seed got planted, but now I'm actually prepared to hear what it is, to shift whatever it might be, to get, you know, to move forward in that area of life. And I think for like going back to, and we talked about it on the last podcast, is like waking up and getting your mindset and you aligned, rising and aligning, and setting those goals and knowing it's not just the destination, because so often, so many people, you know, whether it's financially, when we've experienced it too, or it's physically, it's like, I want to lose 30 pounds. Well, you lose the 30 pounds, then you gain 30 or 40 back. And then it's like, there's not progression. No, like that's just a waypoint. I want to lose 30 pounds. I feel great. Oh, I actually want to lose another 20 pounds or 30 pounds, or no, I actually like where I'm at. So now I got to figure out how to maintain this, because how you get there is going to look different, or how you maintain it is going to look different than how you get somewhere.
Yeah, agreed. I agree. And I think that part of what we're talking about is the invitation into, you know, growth is not a skill set as much as it is a mindset, right? Like skill set is secondary, because if I try to put a skill set on a faulty mindset, it won't work. So I can have the best goals in the world, but if I don't have a mindset that's really ready to grow, it's irrelevant, right? Or I might get there, but to your point, I won't stay there. And so I think what I'm hearing is like just this invitation that it's a new day every day. And the day that you decide to make a change gets to be the day that you get to start making the change. And the day that you plant the seed for change and the day that you manifest the revelation of that change are two totally different days. And I think it's learning to stay the course and learning to get in line and stay in line, as you said last podcast. And it's recognizing that the pressure isn't bad. The pressure is a privilege. The pressure is there to build character, right? Yeah, we want peace. And we got to be okay with learning about peace. You know, like we want patience. I need to actually build the muscle within me to develop patience. And the only way to do that is with some pressure and with a little bit of like opposition to actually build the strength and the resolve of, no, that is who I am. That is what I want. Get down and give me a few push-ups.
Yep. And I think with anything that's worthwhile in life, and especially a God-sized dream, like it doesn't look, that's why they're, you know, like you see people and you're like, oh, it must be nice, like overnight success. And you're like, but you don't see the 10 to 15 to 20 years before that they were putting in and failing and practicing and trying different things. And then finally something happened, but that finally wasn't the first thing. It was after years of trial and error and growing in different areas of their life. And I think that's a practice I'm working through too, because it's like, there again, you do something and you expect results. So you have to have the right time frame in mind of like, my expectation is here's my goal. and I want to accomplish this goal. And yeah, I want to set some time around it because I'm going to put in the work to do it. And then it's just a checks and balance of like, how much progress have I made? But don't get discouraged if I'm not where I want to be in that time frame, because maybe I'm like, well, I want to accomplish this in 2 months, and it's totally unrealistic, but you don't know because you've never done it.
Yeah.
But all the work that you're starting to lay the foundation. And I think so often so many people quit from their dreams and from their goals is because they don't see the results in the time frame that they think they should get them in, as opposed to what it's really going to take.
Yeah, that's solid. So good. So on that note, we want to encourage you, not on January 1st or January 30th or any particular, just every day, to consider that that's the day to start. And then tomorrow will be the day to not stop, right? Start today. Don't stop tomorrow. Lean in and dream on.
I'm Julia Gentry, and along with my husband, Travis Gentry, we discuss real, raw, and not small talk conversations about faith, family, entrepreneurship, and all the things that matter most in this life. This is the Dream On podcast.